get yourself into a group of peers, so you're not isolated. You can exchange ideas, but they'll be your ideas.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome back to the Art Dimensions podcast, Beyond the Palette. This is Whitney Rosenson, your host and owner of Art Dimensions. Today, I'm honored to be interviewing the world-renowned and West Coast light and space artist, Laddie John Dill. So a little background on Laddie. After graduating with a BFA, Laddie became a printing apprentice and worked closely with established artists like Robert Rauschenberg, Klaus Oldenburg, Roy Lichtenstein, and Jasper Johns. Laddie was one of the first Los Angeles artists to exhibit light and space work in New York. He has been crafting light and earthy materials like concrete, glass, sand, and metal into luminous wall pieces, sculptures, and installations since the 1970s. Also, Laddie Dill's work is exhibited in the permanent collections of national and international institutions, such as MoMA in New York City, LACMA, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and the Chicago Art Institute. Laddie Dill has been a strong supporter of Art Dimensions for over 20 years. He worked closely with my mother when she ran the business, and now I have the distinct pleasure of working with Laddie as well. Let's dive in. Hi, Laddie. How are you?
Hi, great. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good.
You're all organized.
I have to be organized, yes. Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you so much for chatting with me on Beyond the Palette today and for welcoming all of us into your amazingly creative world.
Well, Whitney, you're more than welcome for that. You've been a supporter for me for so long, since your childhood.
I know, I grew up with a huge Laddie Dill in our dining room. That's how I got introduced to you, but we'll get into that. All right. Let's jump in. Did you always want to be an artist?
I don't know, ever thinking about anything else. I was always an artist. My mother was an artist, amongst other things, and my father, my father was an actor. In my early childhood, my stepfather had a lot of influence on me. And it was a creative family. And as you know, my brother's an artist. My sister's an artist, has a degree in art history. My daughter's an artist. My granddaughter's an artist. My brother-in-law, my son-in-law is an artist. Yeah, it's a family of artists. And so there's always been a lot of support, behind that. My mother, we grew up with, whatever you do it with passion. So that was the mantra.
I like that motto.
Yeah. So I grew up in that kind of environment. Plus, my parents knew a lot of interesting people. A few of them were artists, even. I really identified with that really early, from the age of 7. I think. Whenever you start to become conscious of yourself,
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you did.
Yeah, I just recognized myself as an artist and just saw things as an artist. And I didn't know what I was going to do as an artist. As a kid, I thought the dream job would be working for Walt Disney or something. It's 12 years old. Actually ended up working for Walt Disney for a short period of time. Yeah, I've never thought about being anything else but an artist.
Okay.
And most of the artists that I know, one of my close friends like Charles Arnoldi, they don't remember wanting to do anything else as well. So it's sort of in your DNA, I guess.
Yeah. I want to talk about your artwork. So can you tell us about some of the different series that you have? I know you've got, on your website, there are like 4 or 5 different categories. We don't have to go through all of them, but tell us about some of your series.
Okay. The first works that I ever made outside of art school were the light pieces, were the early, I think I started about 68, 67, 68, started experimenting with gases and glass. materials that were light oriented. I had a studio downtown where I could black it out completely. So my studio consisted of about 7,000 pounds of sand and then these neon pieces. And they took all kinds of different manifestations. But I had some influence too from Arnoldi and also from Peter Alexander, who had a very clear vision. I really give Peter a lot of credit for really seeing what I was doing. And we're talking, we were in our early 20s, Chuck. I started experimenting with the sand. That's where the 7,000 pounds of sand. This is something you do in your 20s. I had to carry
Yeah, it was heavy.
all the sand up a flight of stairs, got it all up there. And
Wow.
it was like an ocean of sand. And so that was my palette. And I started just dropping these neon strips that I ordered from this neon company. It's called Alert Light Neon. And the guy that made them for me, his name was Rio Score. I'll never forget that. The guy came into my consciousness through Bob Irwin, who was actually a friend, close. I said, hey, you know where I can get some, good solid neon guidance? And he says, look up Rio Score. So I did. And I was working with Rio Score till he passed away. That really interesting stories and all of that. They were riding high. They had a small shop. It had to be about like 40 by 40 feet. They were making all the walk, don't walk signs. They got the
Oh, interesting.
yeah, remember walk, don't walk signs were in neon first.
Yeah, yeah.
So they were great. They were in a good mood. They gave me a corner of the studio and showed me how to, weld and all that kind of stuff, and we worked together. I remember them asking me questions like, what do you do with these? What do they do? And I said, you just look at them. And then a couple of weeks later, I come in and to work in the corner there and lay things out, do all that kind of stuff, They said, we know what you're doing. And I said, what's that? You're selling these to people in Beverly Hills.
Exactly.
And I said, oh, busted. What are you getting for these? A couple of $100? I said, I wish, Anyway, that's a little bit of humor on me.
So the light work, you call them light sentences, right?
I call them light sentences because I would lay them out and I'd have to cut. You don't know what you're gonna, when you see a light piece unlit, like a neon piece, you can't really tell what it is, because of the coatings on the inside. So I would light them up and color code them. And I'd start writing it down so I wouldn't lose track of what was there, They just kind of read in a line. And so I just called them light sentences.
And you put them, sometimes they are installed on walls. Are they also installed in the sand? Like you
Yes,
also have them in sand?
but they're different in the sand. They're solid color.
Okay.
There's no variation in the color.
Okay.
So in the pieces that are wall oriented, I actually weld sections together. They interact with each other to create, whatever mood I want to create. So I've been doing this for over 50 years now. So I think I have it down.
Yes, I would say you
There's
have.
there's always the one you didn't do, and so I always have to go back. So I'm still making these pieces 50 years later. I'm making, they don't look like the early ones, but I'm still working in the neon.
So most people, at least I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people know you for your cement and glass and oxide pieces, which that's what I grew up with in the dining room of my childhood home, was a big one, a beautiful, beautiful one. So, but these are totally different. I mean, do people now people know you for the light sentences, but from
Right.
years ago, I would say people knew you for the cement work.
Well, here's the thing. I started working, I had a show with Sonneman Gallery when I was about 27 in New York. After that, I got asked to show in a lot of places in Europe. I remember when I did one in Berlin, and that's when I decided, these are very ephemeral pieces. They last about the length of an exhibition.
Mm.
Ridiculously hard to own. I do know a couple of collectors that are really dedicated to them and very sophisticated people that own a couple of them, that own the sand pieces, and they're in big warehouses
Oh, cool.
type spaces. These are the collectors that they don't even hang it in their home or have it in their home. They just have a separate warehouse with looks like a museum.
The whole installation, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I was doing this piece in Germany, and I started thinking, I've got to they're so ephemeral that I really like to make something solid that would last. And so I could see it in the context of other times. That was my rationale for it, which made a lot of sense at the time. So I went to the Wizard of Venice, Jack Brogan, whose name, Jack.
I know the name, yeah.
Jack did all of Bob Irwin's work, and he engineered all that stuff. And he also did work for Peter Alexander, Dwayne Valentine, all the light space guys for sure. And he was the face behind a lot of it. And I was in a show, luckily, at the Walker Art Center in 1972, I think it was, or maybe it was 71. I met Jack on a plane. He was going to do a scrim piece for Bob Irwin for the show. And Bob and I shared this room. So I got to know Jack pretty well. Bob never made it. And we started talking about my light pieces. And we really worked quite well together, Irwin and I, because his work, he didn't want anything in the room that gave light off, like any lights from the top or anything. But his piece gave off this kind of nice, kind of even light, from the screen. It was a huge piece. It was probably about 40 feet wide, at least, 30 feet high.
But what's a scrim, Laddie?
Scrim is a cloth material that they use in stages a lot in the theater, where if you look at it from the side, it appears to be solid. If you look at it straight on, it's translucent. And it's just basically woven, but it's used in show business mostly. So Bob did this, and my piece really had light, but didn't give off light. It was contained. That's where that word contained radiance comes from. That's always attached. We worked well. We did a few exhibitions, one up in Seattle. I remember we would share, areas. So that worked out pretty well. The reason I was into the light pieces was my stepfather was also a lens designer and a mathematician. And I can say he was a genius. Not my blood father, unfortunately for me. Anyway, I grew up in a world of, oscilloscopes and lasers running down the hall, breaking off into 5 sections, things like that. We even had video cameras before they were released, and you could see yourself on black and white television. Anyway, so I grew up in this kind of tech environment. So it kind of came naturally to me. I was always fascinated anyway by the quality of the light in an oscilloscope or a neon tube, inside that glass. When I say neon, I'm also meaning argon gas and helium.
Those are inside the light, the tubes.
Yeah, that's the gas inside the tube, which is then activated by these electrodes that come from a transformer. The transform forms 120 voltage into like thousands of voltage, but then the amperage is then lowered into milliamps. So
Okay.
if you accidentally touched one, the
Broke one open or something.
ends, no, breaking them, they just die, but touching them while it's plugged in, you'll get zapped, but it won't kill you.
All right, I just want to mention before we continue, you can see, please go to laddiejohndill.com. It's LaddieJohnDill to see these light sentences and the ones installed in sand, the ones that are installed on walls. I mean, they're just incredible. You've got your light work, you've got your cement work. What are your favorite materials? Which is your favorite series, or what are your favorite
I
materials?
don't have a favorite series because I'm working almost concentrically. I picked up on doing that. Actually, I was very lucky. You mentioned I worked at Gemini, and so I got to know Bob Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns and all those guys pretty well. So when I went to New York, the only people I knew were those guys. So I called Jasper Johns. I was looking for a place to stay, right? And I thought maybe he could turn me on to something. I'd never been in New York before. I got his secretary. This is in a phone booth. Remember, no cell phones. And there's this raging, it was in January, this raging storm. I'm in this telephone booth and I called his number and the secretary answers and she said he was out of town, but she'll call him and just ask him real quick. He might know something. She'll call me back in 5 minutes. So I just waited in the telephone booth. And then I got the call back and she said, well, right off the top of his head, he doesn't know anything, but if you come by the office, you can have the key to his space. He's going to be gone for 2 weeks. So the person I was with and I went over there and got the key, and we were in Jasper Johns' studio. And then Jasper came back and said, "Oh, just hang there for a while, And then after a while, I made a decision after about a week or so, or 2 weeks maybe. But I was very, very lucky because I got to know him. And when he got back to warm up, he started doing concentric circles. And if you remember the targets, his first target was painted in 1952, I believe. So he just started from the beginning again and just worked up to it. And he was working on this huge Dymaxion map, must be about 30 feet across or more than that. So I had the luxury of watching him paint, all that kind of stuff, He taught me to think that way, like concentrically, then taught me just watching him. I said, wow, that's crazy. In other words, his vocabulary of what he does, he'll go back on it occasionally.
Like rework certain areas, or
yeah, just ideas. Like drawing these concentric circles, and that could be a record, like a 72 RPM. Those.
Yeah, the old records.
Yeah, real records. I don't know that I kind of picked up on that, and I thought, well, okay, so you have a vocabulary of materials that you could use. So I'm constantly reinventing the ideas that I had even earlier, not rehashing, but kind of moving them in a different direction. So then in Germany, not to be redundant, I decided I wanted to make work that was a little more solid. So I went to Jack Brogan and I said, I wonder if you know of a material that I can mix with like an earth material, like cement, where I could paint with it, cast it, carve it, like clay and all that. And Jack came up with it. He found this material that was readily available. It's called Acryl 60. I give all my ideas. It's made by Thorough Seal. You mix it into cement, and it gives cement an incredible adherence ability. And then I found out the hard way that if I didn't introduce silicone to it, the frame, apparently, this is molecular movement, but it expands and contracts. that could break the glass. I mean, just that little molecular, until I started tempering the glass. But more than that, I added the silicone, which actually worked in my favor. And I was able to, really articulate with it. I introduced glass because it was a completely different material. And that adventure took me to pigmenting the cement, what's going to be behind the glass. And I wanted it to be like earth materials. So I started using earth materials to pigment the cement.
And those are the oxides.
Oxides, right.
Okay.
Right. And now you can get them actually now in liquid form, which was hard to get at first, which it's very dangerous material. You don't even want it on your hands. But in the cement, it was okay. I mean, the percentage of it was so small, even for a bright blue one, like the one you grew up with,
Right.
Not a lot of pigment in there, because if you add too much pigment, then it weakens the cement. But the idea, I mean, the impetus behind it was to show a reflective surface against a matte surface, but also get into landscape and from an aerial point of view.
And they do look, that one that I grew up with, and my dad's old office building in Beverly Hills, I think the address is 9350 Wilshire. But there's a whole grid of your pieces in the lobby, or at least there used to be.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to go by.
Yeah. It's on, I'll tell you later. But the blues are gorgeous, and it does look like a landscape from an aerial, from a higher
Aerial
vantage
point of
point.
view. Yeah.
So you mentioned
aerial landscapes, basically. Sometimes I call them that, actually.
You call them aerial landscapes?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I did at some point, and then I started working with those materials in a more formal way. So I started working with like openings and doors and portals.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the same material. So that was the Portal series. All of this is in the 80s, the mid 90s, all the way up into the mid 90s. Then I started working with the metal materials.
Those are metal from aircraft.
Right.
Right?
Yes. Now the sand, one of the things I insisted on doing for my own mentality was that all the material had to come from where it was shown. So like the Minneapolis show, I used local mines, sand. It had a kind of a greenish feel to it because there's a lot of lime, jade oxides, not Chinese jade, but like, jade oxide is very prevalent in like Big Sur and places like that.
So that was the sand.
Around, yeah.
Wow.
And I remember one time in Seattle, I saw a piece. This is a piece I did in Seattle. I saw this huge barge go by with this pile of slag in it, which is actually material from making steel, and it's jet black. And so I found out about it, get a black piece from that material, indigenous to the area.
Oh, I never knew this about you. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so the last, I did a show in Paris a couple of years ago at the Gulbenkian Museum. And again, I wanted to use indigenous material. And they said, well, good luck finding sand in Paris, that kind of thing. But with the internet, I just found out, geologically, that Paris sits on this plain underneath that's made out of, Letitian sandstone. That's what the Louvre is made out of, Notre Dame is made out of, and they still mine it. The gallery I was working with, obviously I don't speak French, so we found through the internet that it sits on this plain and that there are mines outside of Paris, like 10 miles outside of Paris. That was all.
Not far.
And, nobody speaks English, so I brought along a guy. We ended up using everything indigenous. I had all the neon made, and all that. So
all in France. Wow.
Still happens. Yeah. Yeah. Did the same thing in Taipei. So
That's remarkable. I mean, and also you're giving work to people who live in the area. The people who are mining or
oh
gathering
yeah.
work, they are working. So that's really wonderful.
Plus, I gotta mention the Skull Banking Museum. Amazing, because about 2 days later, 100 bags of 100-pound sand, bags full of lutetium sandstone, grounded finely, were waiting for me.
Ah,
So
perfect.
miracles happen.
Miracles happen. I love it. So you mentioned Jasper Johns. Who are some of your other great influences?
Oh, Bob Rauschenberg, for
Okay.
sure. When I was working at Gemini, Bob came to the studio with a couple of people, and he said, "Hey, I'm supposed to do this installation, outdoor installation on a plane, that's above in Baldwin Hills, you
Okay.
know, overlooks LA." He said, "Do you want to do a couple of light pieces?" And I'll do a light piece. And I said, "Well, yeah. I mean, in 1968, Bob Rauschenberg was on top of the pile. And fantastic guy. Everybody knows that." So then it was it was successful in a sense. A lot of people showed up. It was a Gemini crowd, and all that. Stanley Grinstein, Sid Felsen, all those guys. Then Bob calls me a month later or something. He says, "I bet you're waiting for the next collaborator." I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, that was a highlight of my art career right there." He said, "I'll do you one better. Andy Warhol's doing a show at the Pasadena Art Museum. All my dealers will be in town, and I'll take them over to your studio." And he brought Ileana Sonnabend, who was married to Leo Castelli. So Sonnabend Gallery was a terrific gallery. And he brought her over, and they offered me a show. So I went to New York, called Jasper Johns up.
God, these stories, I mean, they're just
These are things you do when you're in your early 20s, or mid 20s.
right, right. Well,
Try it
did
at
that,
40, you wouldn't do it. You'd be too embarrassed. But I was so lucky. I mean, I keep talking about that. But when Jasper got back, he would have these 5 o'clock cocktail parties.
every day.
These guys like to drink. His buddies were like John Cage, Buckminster Fuller, Merce Cunningham, and this guy from the South Carolina Museum that Jasper actually gives money to quite heavily. Those were the guys that I got to spend some time with. I was so nervous sitting next to John Cage. I didn't know what to say. I was like freaking out inside my head. I'm sitting
How
next
old were
to
you
John Cage, and I was 26.
Okay. Okay.
He was a chain smoker. You could smoke in those days.
Right.
So I bummed a cigarette off it, and then we just started talking. But he was hired than a kite.
Oh, oh God. I just want to say, I love these stories. They're like parts of art history that I just get to hear firsthand, and the listeners get to hear firsthand. And it's just
Well, check this out. Okay, so we decide we're not going to stay at Jasper's. And I was talking it over at Max's Kansas City with my friend. And Chuck was there as well, Arnoldi. I was saying, well, I've got to leave Jasper's. I don't want to stay there too long because, guests, Rauschenberg overheard us, leans over the table and says, "You could really help me out. I just bought a place down in Florida. I'm going to live down there. Can you move into my place and take care of it?" So we just threw everything in a fucking blanket or something and dragged it down the street to Bob's.
Oh my God. Oh my God. How long did you stay there?
A couple of months. Yeah.
Wow.
Bob came back, he was back and forth.
Between Florida and New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember like running into people and they'd say, when I was staying at Jasper's, they said, well, where are you living? Where are you? I'd say Essex and Houston. And they said, God, do you know how close you are to Jasper Johns? Actually, I'm inside the walls.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's ancient history.
Oh God, but it's great history. And what are you up to? All right, I just want to
What are
say,
you up to now?
yeah, what are you up to these days in your studio? What are you working on? Or are you
I'm
working
working
on
with metal, mostly.
the aircraft metal?
Yeah. And what I'm trying to do with the metal is it's like a lens. And actually we score the top of the aluminum so that it can manipulate light. Almost like the scrim thing, right?
Right.
And it reverses itself
And those you make in
in the
silver.
light, and it's very sensitive to light.
Yeah. Now, how do you get the red? You've got red.
How do I get the red? It's all
Well, I just want to
burnished.
mention the colors. Oh, it's burnished,
It's
right?
burnished oil paint, but real high quality. It's this Dutch oil paint. They have a red. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
And
beautiful.
you burnish and you burnish and you burnish and you burnish and you burnish until the silver comes through, and of the aluminum, and then the two give it a luminous feeling.
Yeah.
Or else it just look like a painted piece of metal.
No. They don't look like just a painted piece.
Yeah, they don't. They're inside the metal. Like you really burnish the heck out of it. And then you follow the striation marks as you're burnishing.
For emerging artists out there listening, because there are a lot of artists who listen to this podcast, what advice do you have for them? Or do you have any advice?
I'm very interested in young artists, for one thing. You can't have an art community without young artists, and you got to be able to support them. So I'm hoping that this is moving in that direction to a certain extent. I was lucky, but first of all, don't give up. But if you have a plan B, take it. I used to address my students at UCLA. I would say, it was a trick question. All those who are intelligent enough to have plan B, raise their hands, and a couple of suckers would raise their hands, And I said, well, take it now, man, because I want people who have no choice. And okay, advice to the young artists is, first of all, get yourself into a group of peers, so you're not isolated. You can exchange ideas, but they'll be your ideas, not, a critic's ideas or, artists interacting. And let me tell you, they interact a lot easier when they're young than when they're older. You get older, you just get into your own thing, and it becomes kind of hard. But I think the peer thing is very important. So you know that you're not in it alone. I had a great peer system in Los Angeles with Jim Ganzer, Arnoldi, and then some of these older guys that weren't peers. They were like Irwin and Larry Bell and all these guys, highly supportive guys. But then there were guys our age, which we back and forth with information and ideas. Peter Alexander was way up there. Was super helpful to me, as well as Chuck.
That's great advice. Thank you.
That's one advice. The other is never approach a gallery. Have them approach you.
Okay.
That means you're going to have to get into your peer system. You're going to have to get involved in the art world. It doesn't mean going to a 3,000 person opening. But
get in there.
Galleries are networking, that kind of thing. And that's one of the important things about an opening is that kind of networking. You really have to go all in. You're all in. If you're not all in, you're not going to make it.
Okay. That is great advice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I love this question. Describe your aesthetic in 3 words.
Curiosity, minimalism to a
Minimalism.
certain extent. I don't know if that'll work though. I know curiosity is one. I always want to see it,
That's
Um,
awesome.
and you have to be a workaholic,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
like
Are you a
it's
workaholic?
very hard on relationships. Yes, I'm a workaholic. And all the artists I know, including all those guys I mentioned before, are all workaholics.
I mean, but look at those careers
Yeah.
and your career too.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just sort of capsulating it to a certain extent, but I work all the time. If I'm not physically making a mark, I'm thinking about it. So you have to think like an artist, like a photographer thinks like a photographer, sees through the camera. At least if I can be so bold as to say so, not being a photographer. You just have to go all in. That's the best way I can put it. All or nothing.
Okay.
I'm going to be 80 this year, and I don't know how to do anything else. But I love doing it, so I lucked out on that.
You keep saying you lucked out, and we lucked out that you have created what you have created for us to enjoy. All right, I'm going to wrap up a little bit. What art do you show in your own home, or do you only have your own work displayed?
Oh, good question. I don't have any of my work in my own home. I can't live with my own work. I can't relax because I start looking at something. I start working on it mentally. If you come to my house, you won't see my work.
Do you have work from others?
Oh yeah, I have a really extensive collection
Okay.
of mostly young artists.
Really?
Huh? Yeah. Yeah. I used to buy stuff from my UCLA students, get things from Otis students.
So cool. So great. All right. Before I sign off, I wanted to know, Laddie, is there anything else you'd like the listeners to know about you?
No, except that I'm still alive and still working and expecting to live to 120.
You better.
It's lonely up there though. I've got to mention a lot of people that influenced me though. That's why I'm so lucky. I mean, I'm close with Frank Gehry and Arnoldi, and of course there's Bob was alive. Jim Rosenquist
He was really an influence for you.
was great. Yeah, he was great. We had some stories. He was a great guy.
But he worked in New York or in LA?
He was New York and Florida.
Oh, and okay. Where is your studio now?
It's in West Adams.
Okay.
I moved from Venice. We were surrounded by homeless people. It was terrible. I mean, I have kids, so, it was just unhealthy.
Yeah.
So I got down to, my studio is not as large as the ones I had in Venice, but I like it. And the area is great. It's like Venice was 35 years ago.
Really?
That kind of interaction, a lot of young artists down here, which I really like. There's Ochi Galleries in the same building, she
Oh,
shows
nice.
a lot of young artists.
Yeah.
So it's very vibrant down here, even though it's low key. And it's not Venice with the beach and all that, but it's the same vibe.
Sounds
Young
great.
artists.
And I haven't been to your studio yet, so I really look forward to coming.
Well, it's not the 30,000 square foot gigantic one.
I remember that one.
I get to the other side of the room and forget why I, was there,
All right. Well, Laddie, I want to thank you so much for guesting today on Beyond the Palette.
Okay. And one more thing. Make sure you go by LACMA in the next few weeks. The show that was traveling, part of the LACMA collection, is traveled to about 4 museums, and now it's here. And it's the LACMA collection,
Okay.
just curated by Kara Elliott. And it opens on the 30th, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. All your favorites.
Do you have work in that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm definitely gonna go. And Sam Francis has some more. There's
He might be in it. I know, there's Bruce Nauman, that
lots of
low.
that. Okay.
Norman Zammit.
Oh, I don't
Remember him?
know. Well, you remember I'm on.
Actually, the painting that they have is really beautiful. Yeah.
So this opens on the 30th
Yeah, that lack. Yeah.
at LACMA. Okay, fabulous. All right, everybody. In addition to looking at laddiejohndill.com, you can check out our Instagrams. It's at Laddie John Dill and at Art Dimensions if you want to follow us there. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And I hope you all are as inspired by Laddie as I am. And I wish you all happy creating.